Hey, what's going on, guys? Rome Gaming here, back in another video. Today's episode, we're going to be covering Phase 4 of Enhancement Shaman. So as we all know, historically, Enhancement Shaman has had its issues finding their place as a DPS in a raid environment. However, in Season of Discovery, the tables have turned quite a bit. So Enhancement Shaman is going to bring great party buffs, totem utility, and just a great damage profile to any sort of raid composition. Enhancement Shaman is a super fun spec to play. It's unique, and to be honest, who doesn't enjoy controlling the elements in any sort of game for that matter? It's just flat out fun, and there's always a fun and engaging button to press in this spec. So let's start out with some of the pros. The first pro here is going to be sustained single target cleave and AOE damage. So it's just consistently good across the board from its damage profile. We will see over here in a bit that it does lack some DPS cooldowns, but just kind of generally speaking, its flat out damage profile in terms of single target, cleave, and AoE is just consistently good. We also have pretty good survivability. So just for example, with our Maelstrom weapon, if we get max stacks with that, we can get a quick healing wave off on ourselves to try to top us off. So pretty good in the survivability department. In terms of utility, Shaman is pretty much unmatched. We got totems like Strength of Earth, Grace of Air. We have a Mana Spring totem. Shamans just typically have a tool for every encounter that you're going to be facing. Now again, kind of like we talked about earlier, we don't have great DPS cooldowns. So we're not necessarily the best DPS spec for any sort of like burn phase encounters. There's also a large number of keybinds, so there's lots of buttons to press. So not a surprise to many, I'm sure, but it can be kind of difficult getting used to all of the button bloat on the spec. We also do have many resources that we'll be tracking. We've got totems, we've got shield charges, we have mana, and all this is on top of our normal DPS rotation. And then finally, there is some tough competition on our gear, mainly with hunters, of course, but especially with certain rings, weapons, and trinkets, you're going to have a tough time rolling against warriors. So it's a pretty good introduction. Let's go ahead and move into stat priority. So attack power, or AP, is going to be near the bottom of our priority list here. Not necessarily because it's bad, but just kind of due to how itemization works in Season of Discovery. AP is great for Enhancement Shamans, but items typically provide twice as much attack power as other stats. So it's good, but AP requires a higher quantity to match the benefits of some of the other stats. So that can be a little bit of a deceiving stat. So typically you're going to want to prioritize percentage stats like percent hit, percent crit over normal stats. So you can kind of see what we have here. For percent stats, it's going to be melee crit over melee hit over spell crit. So those are going to be the main things that you're kind of after. Then in terms of normal stats, you're going to be going strength over intellect, agility, which equals attack power, which equals spell power. Now, one thing to note is that our Rune of Dual Wield specialization does provide 10% melee hit, ensuring that, certain special abilities like Lava Lash and Storm Strike never miss. But gear with melee hit is still valuable because it increases the likelihood of our auto attacks landing, which are a significant part of our damage. Okay, so this is going to be pretty much the main build that we are running for Enhancement Shaman. We're going to recommend running Call of Thunder and Elemental Devastation to boost our elemental damage. You can also choose improved Ghost Wolf here for the cooldown reduction on Ghost Wolf. And you're also going to want to avoid putting any talents into improved weapon totems here, because it's not going to be great for Enhancement Shaman with Wind Fury totem, because typically you're going to be getting that buff through Wild Strikes on a Feral Druid. So this means we'll be maintaining Grace of Air totem typically. So this is pretty much the standard build for the dual wielding Enhancement Shaman. So let's quickly go into runes now. For our head rune, we'll be running Mental Dexterity. So dealing damage with Lava Lash or Storm Strike is going to increase our attack power by 65% of your intellect and your spell damage by 20% of your total attack power. So if you remember earlier why we said intellect is a pretty high stat priority for us, it's going to be due to this Mental Dexterity. In our chest rune, we have a dual wield specialization, and I do apologize. I believe I said earlier this value was at 10%, but I believe it's at 5%. So 5% chance with both spells and melee attacks while dual wielding. And your Storm Strike ability now hits with both weapons while dual wielding and increases the damage done with your offhand weapon by 50%. We also have Rolling Thunder in our wrist rune. So Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning have a 50% chance to add an additional charge to your active Lightning Shield up to a max of 9 charge. And then Earth Shock now releases all Lightning Shield charges above 3, dealing their damage to their target and energizing you for 2% of max mana per charge released. So kind of like we said earlier, as one of the cons is you do have a lot of things to track, including our Lightning Shield charges, which we will expend with our Earth Shock ability. Now this is for single target. I believe there is also a wrist rune called Overload that you can take for AOE scenarios, but in most cases you're going to be using Rolling Thunder here. In our hand rune, we'll be running Lava Lash. So you charge your offhand weapon with lava, instantly dealing 100% of offhand weapon damage. The damage is increased by 125% if your offhand weapon is enchanted with Flame Tongue. In our waste room, we are running Maelstrom Weapon. When you deal damage with a melee attack, you have a chance to reduce the cast time and mana cost of your next Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Lesser Healing Wave, or Lava Burst spell by 20%. Chances increase by 50% while your main hand is enchanted with Wind Fury Weapon, and by another 50% if wielding a two-handed weapon, stacks up to 5 times. So if you get 5 stacks on this, all these spells listed up above will be instant cast. So this is another thing that you will have to track these stacks. You'll have to also track your Lightning Shield as well on top of your totems. So kind of a lot going on. In our leg rune, we're going to get Greater Ghost Wolf. So this is really nice because this is going to basically allow us to use our Ghost Wolf indoors, in a dungeon, or in a raid. Our foot rune will be running Spirit of the Alpha. So you can put this on a tank and you're just simply going to increase the threat that they generate by 45%. And then when you do that, you're also going to get the Loyal Beta buff, which is going to increase your physical damage done by 5% and reduce all threat generated by 30%. Cloak rune, we're running Feral Spirit, summons 2 Spirit Wolves under the command of the Shaman, lasting 45 seconds. Then in our ring rune, we're going to have 2 different specializations. We're going to be running the Nature specialization in one, so chance to hit when nature spells increased by 6%. And then Axe specialization in the other, skill with axes and 2-handed axes increased by 5. Okay, so for single target rotation, your main 2 priorities are going to be Strength of Earth Totem and Grace of Air Totem. So you can kind of see down here at the bottom, we have our Earth, Fire, Water, and Air totems. These are typically what you're going to be running for pretty much all encounters. You know, you can kind of swap out something like Poison Cleanse Totem or something like that if the encounter calls for it. But for most scenarios, these are going to be the totems that you're running. So after you get the totem situation taken care of, your main priority is not overcapping on 5 stacks of Maelstrom Weapon, and you're going to be using those 5 stacks on Lightning Bolt. So Lightning Bolt is going to outscale Chain Lightning in single target, and Chain Lightning is going to outscale Lightning Bolt in AoE Cleave. So after this is taken care of, really you're going to want to be focusing on keeping these other abilities on cooldown. So Storm Strike, one of the 2 shocks, and then Lava Lash. So typically you're going to make sure that you get your Flame Shock up, and then while Flame Shock is ticking on your next shock, you're going to be using Earth Shocks. Now, one thing to remember is your Earth Shock does do quite a bit of threat, and then if you were casting that with a large stacked Lightning Shield, you're going to be expending those stacks from Lightning Shield with your Earth Shock, and it's going to rip a ton of threat. So typically just start with Flame Shock, and then you can get into Earth Shocks. So keep Flame Shock up, and then at high stacks of your Lightning Shield, you'll want to Earth Shock. And then down here at the very bottom, we have a Lightning Shield if it does fall off for whatever reason, and keep Searing Totem up. So for your AoE rotation, you will be casting Lightning Shield if it is not active. And I believe earlier in the video, I called the wrist rune Overload, but it's actually Overcharge. So basically what's going to happen is when you expend a charge of your Lightning Shield, it's going to hit all mobs around you, and it will never drop below 3 charges. So for AoE scenarios, make sure you have some wrist with that rune on it. You can swap over to it, and you can just use those wrists for trash packs. Now, outside of Lightning Shield, going back to Strength of Air and Grace of Air, you want to make sure that those 2 are down. Huge priority. Then not too much really changes between AoE and single target. You're going to swap out Chain Lightning with your Maelstrom Weapon. You're going to cast Storm Strike as usual. And then you're going to swap out Fire Nova and a Magma Totem with the Searing Totem, or from the Searing Totem. So what you'll do is you'll drop your Fire Nova Totem. When it explodes and goes on cooldown, then you'll go into your Magma Totem. You will also be using Flame Shock. It'll be pretty low priority though on the list, and you want to spread that out between as many mobs as possible. And if there's nothing else to press, then you'll Lava Lash. Very similar to single target, you're going to make sure that you're not wasting any Maelstrom stacks. It's the most important part of anything you really see on this list. Maybe not important than these first three, of course, but if you're overcapping on Maelstrom weapon, you're really going to see it in your DPS. So make sure at 5 stacks you are expending them as quickly as possible. Another thing, Fire Nova Totem and Magma Totem do not have a cap limit, so as you get more and more mobs in your pack, the stronger and stronger those totems become. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We'll see you all in the next one.